Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Tom Horner, and I'm the Mental Health and Wellness Coordinator here at the Pine Island Public School District. And we're trying something new, so a lot of trial and error, but what this first topic is going to be about is digital safety and cyberbullying. And we're super excited to have Heather Colleen here from the Hope Coalition. So with that, we're going to try to keep this nice and brief and be able to reach as many people as possible. Heather.
Yes, thanks, Tom. So again, my name's Heather. I'm here with the Hope Coalition. So just quickly about Hope Coalition, we offer services in Goodhue, Wabasha, and Pierce counties. We have offices based in Red Wing and Wabasha, and we also run the emergency shelter in Red Wing for anyone escaping domestic violence. Overall, as an organization, we provide support to people who have experienced or witnessed violence and are currently at risk of or experiencing homelessness. And with our service areas right now, we're serving about 1,200 people annually. So we have pretty good grasp on what's going on in the counties and have a lot of folks that we're helping. Kids Count is our program that can actually support victims of cyberbullies. So this is a program within Hope Coalition, who supports children who've experienced or witnessed some form of abuse. So this could be, physical neglect or abuse, but it could also be things like teen dating violence or bullying, including cyberbullying. The services the advocates in that program provide crisis intervention, safety planning for the kiddos, age-appropriate support groups. So they'll go get kids after school and bring them into support groups with kids at a similar age who have gone through something similar and do different skill building exercises with them, including emotional coping, life skills, independent skills, things like that, to reduce risk of re-victimization or becoming an abuser later on. And we also do assistance with child-related appointments. So sometimes that's transportation assistance. We've been doing a lot of driving for folks going to get COVID testing recently or get vaccines. So we just want to help fill gaps in services for any of these kiddos who have experienced violence. But today we're going to talk about cyberbullying, such a fun and relevant topic, right? So what is cyberbullying? Cyberbullying is bullying with the use of digital technologies. So that's over digital devices like phones, tablets, laptops, things like that. And it's also over the internet. So online gaming, any place where there's essentially a chat function, which is why it can occur on many different platforms. I think we get so used to it being just on social media, but that's not the only place it can happen. It can happen on those online video games or those apps, those games on their apps, anywhere they can talk with other people. It can happen on online schooling. It can happen over the phone. It can happen anywhere where you're leaving a digital footprint. You can be cyberbullied. This is repeated behavior aimed at one specific person, so the victim. It's intended to shame them, to embarrass them, to make them afraid. I think about cyberbullying as one thing, like somebody picking on you on a picture you posted, but it doesn't always look like that. It can be a large trend to scare you. It can be blackmailing you because they have pictures that you don't want released or information about yourself you don't want released. It can be cyber stalking you, letting people know where they're at, things like that. So it's just that repeated behavior directed at one person. There's several different tactics that can be used by bullies. I've already mentioned a couple, but we'll go into detail kind of on the next slide. But something to keep in mind for parents especially is this leaves a digital footprint. So for victims of cyberbullying, sometimes it's easier to prove your case compared to in-person bullying, right? You can take screenshots. There's kind of a trail of what's been happening. So it's easier for the school or for law enforcement to take action. But also for the bullies, there's a digital footprint out there, right? And so if you're bullying online, this is something that could come back to haunt you down the road if you're trying to get into college, if you're trying to get employed. I had an experience with this when I was employed by a jail. I had to log into my social media and they went back and looked through my timeline and looked through messages and things like that. So it's good for the victims. Bullies, something to keep in mind, and parents of bullies, something to keep in mind. This just isn't adolescent behavior that is a phase, right? It's something that can haunt them as they go into adulthood as well. There are lots of different tactics that cyberbullies use. This can be just lies and false accusations, or kind of gossip and starting rumors, I think is more the lay terms that we would use. You can be bullied for being economically challenged. We're seeing a rise in this recently with online schooling. For the first time ever, classmates can physically see into your home. So you can probably see that I'm likely in an office or a conference room right now, right? But if a child was logging in from a car, if a child was logging in from a shelter, if a child was logging in from a disheveled room that they're sharing with more than one of their siblings, right? You can physically see those things if we're not thinking about the background that we have on Zoom or on these online classrooms. So this is a big thing we're seeing as the pandemic's taken effect, kind of changing in cyberbullying. There's bullying for identifying as LGBTQ+. Unfortunately, this is still a thing. Private photo sharing, this is one of those ones to highlight because there can be legal ramifications for this one. Even if you're a minor, you can get charged with possessing child sexual abuse material or distributing it, even if you're a minor yourself. So important not to engage in that behavior. There can be false identity profiles like catfishing or sock puppeting. I think catfishing is the more common term we all know because of MTV, right? But this is where somebody takes on the profile of somebody else or impersonates another person to try to get access to you. Encouraging self-harm. There's been some pretty high profile cases recently where peers have encouraged other peers to engage in self-harm. So law enforcement is starting to pay attention to those. And we should just never be encouraging that. Folks need help. We don't want to encourage them to do self-harm. Jealousy, bullying, and then doxing, I think is a phrase most people probably aren't familiar with. This is where you're essentially sharing documents, right? Thus doxing. So private data about the person, their social security number, their home address, their full name. For adults, it might be like credit information, things like that, right? So these are just some general tactics of cyberbullying that you might see. And we're seeing a rise in the prevalence, as I've referenced before, related to the pandemic. Kids are online far more now than they have been in previous generations, right? I'm a millennial. I didn't get a cell phone until I was in high school, but my 6-year-old niece has a tablet for school and she can play games on it and access the internet. And so we're getting technology in the hands of kids sooner, which is great. It helps them learn in new ways. But there's safety planning that we need to do on the other side of that, teaching kids to be digitally safe, not to engage in cyberbullying behaviors, and to limit opportunities for cyberbullies to get a hold of them as well. So just something to think about. It's not that technology is inherently bad, it's just that we're facing new challenges now that we weren't facing before. There's also a lot of mental health issues occurring related to this pandemic. So I would argue folks might be more inclined to engage in cyberbullying because they're not feeling great about themselves right now. So something else to think about when we're kind of seeing this uptick that we just haven't historically seen. I think it's just one of these consequences of the pandemic that we are seeing, those of us in the field, but we just haven't quite connected the dots on preventing so far. Cyberbullying is important because the impact on the victims is so huge. Cyberbullying is persistent. Victims can't really get away from it. If somebody's bullying you at school, you at least get to go home and get away from it and recoup. Cyberbullying, they have access to you 24/7. They're in your home, they're at your school, they're at your job, they're wherever you are. It's also really hard to notice. In-person bullying, a trusted adult might see, but cyberbullying is silent, right? You're not going to overhear the conversation between the cyberbully and the victim. It's something that's happening on this device in front of them. So those are why cyberbullying is so hard. And then the impact on the victim is so comprehensive. It can have mental impacts, including self-harm or suicide. It could also lead somebody to take the life of someone else. Like, this is why these things are so concerning. It can have emotional impacts. They can feel ashamed or embarrassed. They could not enjoy things that they previously did enjoy. They could become depressed or anxious. And then physically, we're also seeing symptoms like stomach aches, headaches. Stress takes a toll on our bodies, especially chronic stress, right? And so if you're experiencing cyberbullying, again, we talked about it's persistent, it follows you home, your body is going to experience those symptoms of chronic stress, and you're going to see that physical impact as well. So we're going to talk about some general just prevention strategies for youth, and I'll make sure to give some specific examples. The biggest strategy is to ignore it, in all honesty. If cyberbullies aren't getting the reaction they want, they'll kind of move on. Not that I want them to move on and find more victims, but for you to keep yourself safe, not engaging with them is honestly one of the easiest strategies. Block online haters. Figure out how to block them on the various social media sites that you're on. Sometimes the social media site will just completely ban them from the platform if they're a repeat offender, and most of the time bullies are. This is a place to keep in mind those catfish profiles, though. If you block somebody and then all of a sudden you have a friend request from somebody you don't know, it might be that cyberbully trying to come back. Report it to the social media site. Like I just said with blocking, make sure you're reporting it to the social media site. If they're doing it to you, they're probably doing it to somebody else. And we want to make sure that the social media site knows this person has a history so they can kind of stop it in their tracks. All social media sites have a service agreement. And so most of the time cyberbullying violates that code of conduct that was in the service agreements that everybody agrees to when they create a profile. Be kind and respectful. This kind of goes back to ignoring it. If they're not getting the rise out of you and you're showing you're in control of your emotions and you're not engaging in that cyberbullying behavior, they're probably going to move on because they're not getting what they want. Stick with supporters. This is the same in-person bullying, right? You go with a friend somewhere. You likely have supporters on your online platforms. Stick with those people. Look at what they're saying. Just completely ignore these cyberbullies. Don't let them get to you. This is a reflection on the bully. Most people bully because they aren't feeling good about themselves. People that are feeling good about themselves don't need to bring other people down. So try to remember this isn't anything you did wrong or anything that you were in control of. We can't control other people's behavior. This is a reflection on the cyberbully and the choices that they're making. Acknowledge your feelings. This goes back to the chronic stress piece I was talking about. It's really important that we process the things that are happening. Being cyberbullied is nothing to be ashamed of. You didn't do anything wrong. Talk to your peer group, talk to a trusted adult, bring it to the school, acknowledge how it's making you feel and process through that so you're not feeling the effects of it later in an even more negative way. And just keep being you, right? Like, don't let the cyberbully win. Keep doing the things that make you happy, that fill your cup, that bring you joy. Keep engaging in those things that are interesting to you and make you who you are.
Okay, Heather,
So, go
when
ahead.
you go back to blocking online haters, so if this happened and you continued, you followed up on this, and now this person's creating different accounts, does it ever get to a point where there's legal ramifications where you can actually get a restraining order on a person for cyberbullying? Or, I want to learn a little bit more about that.
Yes. We can talk about it too when I go to reporting cyberbullying, but what's really important, if you're noticing they continue to come back and you're taking the steps, but they're being relentless. I encourage people to keep essentially a stalking log, but this would be kind of a cyber stalking log of the profiles you're seeing, names of usernames, dates that things are happening. Keep as many screenshots as you can of things, especially on forums like Snapchat, where the information goes away so quickly. That information is going to be crucial for law enforcement if it becomes something that crosses the threshold of a crime, or if you choose to get a harassment restraining order. So in the state of Minnesota, you can get a harassment restraining order if there are multiple incidents that impact your feeling of safety, security, or privacy. You do need an adult to file that on your behalf. So parents, this is something you would want to pay attention to. In the last reiteration they did of their restraining order forms, they added harassment over social media. So again, having these timelines, courts like dates and evidence and screenshot, but because this is digital, it's really easy to get those things. So as this is happening, just be conscious to be documenting that, taking screenshots of that, and then contact your local advocacy agency to help you do the paperwork. So you only have to do it once, but that's definitely an option if you are following all these steps and then the online haters or the cyberbullies are coming back. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight 3 principles we tend to give kiddos. Follow the mom principle. Would you be okay with your mom or your dad or another trusted adult saying it? Follow the forever principle because it's going to be there. forever, forever and forever. And then follow the no privacy rule. Just because you have your privacy settings on great doesn't mean somebody else isn't going to screenshot it and put it out there. So just really think about what you're putting on social media. And then we're going to go into some prevention strategies specifically for parents, right? Because you're the ones at home who are teaching kiddos how to be digitally safe. So it's important for you to kind of know things you can do as well to support your youth as they're navigating the internet. Set clear expectations about digital behavior and online reputation, and model those behaviors as well. I'm going to say it, I think, several times on this slide, but kids learn by seeing. They learn by the adults around them. And so we want to make sure if we're telling kids not to be cyberbullies, that we're not also engaging in that behavior ourselves. And you need to set those clear expectations about where they can have their phones. For example, do they need their phone in their room at night? We want to make sure we're teaching kids they probably shouldn't have their phone out in locker rooms or bathrooms, right? And so we don't want to set them up for a scenario where they can cyberbully or become cyberbullied. Educate about the harmful effects of cyberbullying. It can lead to self-harm. It can lead to suicide. It can lead to these negative effects on someone else. And I don't think kids always think about the other side of it, right? So we want to make sure we're teaching them those things. Their behaviors have consequences on other people. Be clear about what can and cannot be viewed or shared. Again, private images is a crime if we are sharing it, if we are viewing it. Incidents of cyberbullying, same way, even if it doesn't cross the threshold of crime. If you're repeatedly sharing acts of cyberbullying, even if somebody else started it, you could find yourself on the other side of a harassment restraining order, which again goes parent to parent, even though the juveniles are the ones that have to follow it. So parents, you're gonna have to tell your boss, you gotta take a day off work to go to court because your kiddo engaged in cyberbullying. It's a lot easier if we just stop it when it's happening and we explain why things can't be shared or viewed. Identify which apps are appropriate for your child to use. I think this one is the hardest because technology is changing so quickly. I constantly hear about apps that kids are using that I have no idea what they are or where they came from. But it's really important when you find out that your child is on an app to learn more about that app, learn how to report cyberbullying, learn about the privacy settings, especially location services. Snapchat is a really big offender with that one, right? They have that snap map where even if you're offline, your friends can see where you're at. Facebook has a similar function where they have their geolocation. If you post a status, if those are turned on, somebody can see where you were when you posted that status. On all forms of social media, we love to check in when we're somewhere, right? But is that opening up an opportunity for a cyberbully to come see you in person? Is that opening up an opportunity for a cyberbully that you may not know in real life to come find you? Those are things that, you want to get familiar with these apps, and you need to get familiar with these security settings. And follow your kiddos on these social media platforms. See what they're posting. Look at the comment sections. It's going to enable you to find cyberbullying sooner in the process, so you can collect some of this evidence and stay on top of it like we've talked about. Establish rules about the amount of time a child can spend online. Does your 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old need to be online at all points in the day? Is there a rule in your house that they can't be online during family time? Is there a rule that they can't have it after their bedtime? What does that look like in your household? I will say I'm giving all these general tips, but at the end of the day, you're the parents and you know your kids better than I ever will. So knowing what your kiddo needs, if there's somebody that is, really sensitive to their peers and what they think, maybe it's safer if they have to put that phone up before they go to bed, Model positive, respectful digital behavior on your own accounts. Again, don't be a cyberbully and then be surprised if your kid is a cyberbully. We need to be conscious of what we are doing ourselves and what we're modeling for the kids. If the rule is kid can't have phone during dinner, parents shouldn't have phone during dinner, right? So whenever possible, modeling those positive relationships with your digital devices. So now we know what cyberbullying is. And it's happened, unfortunately, despite watching this slideshow and knowing all of the information you need to about preventing it, it happens. You do still have the option to report. Like, this isn't the end of the story. It doesn't mean you're just a victim and you throw your hands up. So report it to the online service providers. This is probably the first thing you need to do. Report it to that app, that gaming platform, that social media site. Again, it typically violates their terms of use or their code of conduct. So keep that in mind, report it as soon as possible. They can at least take the post down. Usually they might ban the user for a certain amount of time. They might ban them completely. So just do that initial reporting. You can report to law enforcement. It crosses the threshold of a crime when there's threats of violence, sharing of private images, or stalking and harassment in there. You're always welcome to call law enforcement. I just like preparing parents, like, unfortunately, if it doesn't cross that threshold of a crime, there might not be that much that they're able to do. You're always welcome to call to get it documented, but just keep in mind they have certain thresholds that before they can intervene. Regardless of if it's a crime or not, you do qualify potentially for a harassment restraining order, as I've discussed before. In Minnesota, it's multiple acts impacting your feeling of safety, security, or privacy, and social media harassment is included as an option there. 1 or 2 incidents might not meet that threshold unless there's some threats or some other things happening as well. Sharing private images is an option to get a harassment restraining order. There's lots of nuances and different options. So I would encourage you to contact an agency in your area that does assistance with these types of restraining orders to ask more questions. Everybody's situation is going to be different and so specific. And so talk to somebody. When I was doing direct services, I'm a supervisor now, but when I was doing direct services, I wrote 2 or 3 of these a week. Hopefully you have to write 1 in your lifetime, and that's it. So we're here to help. We want to help parents talk through their various options. But parents, if you think your child's cyberbullying, you need to pay attention to that, because these are situations where you may have to become involved and it's going to impact your life as well. So it's not just a phase. We need to pay attention when these things are happening. Report cyberbullying to the school. Become familiar with your school's policy on bullying and cyberbullying and the definition of it and their reporting procedure. I went on Pine Island's website and I was very quickly able to find, how I would report an incident of bullying. They had it front and center, nice and easy. But it's good if you can look preemptively at those things. So if your child does come forward, you immediately know what to do and you're not having to scramble to tell them what they need. And parents, talk to your child. Acknowledge their feelings. Get as much detail as you can. Who does it involve? When did it start happening? How is it happening? Take as many screenshots as you can, because regardless of whatever path you choose to go down with reporting, the more you have that information, the easier it's going to be for the school, the easier it's going to be for law enforcement, the easier it's going to be to get the restraining order, and you're going to get the outcome that you want sooner. So document, and then provide that emotional support to your kiddo. I'll let Tom ask me questions if he has any, but I wanted you all to have the information for contacting Hope Coalition. Again, we serve Goodhue and Wabasha County, so that will include the Pine Island School District. You're welcome to call our crisis line. You will get a person, you will not get a voice message, or our Kids Count program directly, and I have those phone numbers up here as well, or you can follow us on social media too.
Wow, thank you so much, Heather. That was a lot of wonderful information in a short amount of time, but I think it's going to be super beneficial for parents to have this at their fingertips, because often we don't really think about what we need to do until it's too late. And so having this information is super helpful. I'm not gonna lie, I'm like a bit terrified as a dad. I have a young one at home, and I still remember I've only been in education for about 10 years, but my first couple of years, I would help kids with technology, and now any questions that I have, kids help me. And so that's how fast things are changing. And this genie is out of the bottle. Kids have all this at their fingertips. And I feel like it's at a point now where the more education and the more practice that we can do as parents and educators, the better off it is. Because it's not just a simple take it away or no, you're not going to be able to use this. I mean, they can get anything that they want. And so learning how to manage this in a safe way is ultimately the only option in my opinion. So
right. And just like the schools are trying to catch up, the law is trying to catch up too, which I think is the biggest frustration point when I talk to parents. It's like, why isn't this illegal? Off screen, you and I were talking about the TikTok trend going around, right? And the laws just haven't caught up to the technology. There isn't a precedent for when there's a viral TikTok trend encouraging violence. Like, how do you address that, as from a criminal justice standpoint? And so it takes a very long time to write laws, and it should. It's really important that we get them correct. But, these types of laws haven't necessarily been updated since technology has changed so quickly. And so keeping in mind there could be legal ramifications, but also keeping in mind the law might catch up to some of these things, and things kids were getting away with 2 years ago, they might not get away with now. And so, yes, staying educated on the prevention, reporting when you're able, keeping that evidence, and just spend time with your kids, know what's going on in their lives, build that relationship, make sure they know who they could talk to if this comes up, and give them tools. Most of the time, kids talk to each other first. Kids realize what's happening with their friends before the adults ever figure it out. And so educating your kids will also give them the tools to be able to talk to their friends if this was happening to them too. And so yes, all of this education is so important, and I'm sure this will be outdated in a year because there's going to be new apps and new things, and technology is great and awful all rolled into one.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are in uncharted territory, but I think at the end of the day, whether you're an educator or whether you're a parent or a friend, building that relationship with a kid, building that relationship with others is still number one, just to be as proactive as possible before anything happens. So again, Heather, I want to thank you so much for covering this super important topic. And if anybody ever has questions, feel free to reach out to me. You now have the Hope Coalition information, so we're always here to help you. So again, I want to thank you and hope you have a wonderful day.